You keep her alive. And you set everything right.
Episode 2 of The Last of Us, titled Infected, just launched yesterday. I got to see it last night, and this episode takes place just after the events of the first one. Joel and Tess have just been instructed by Marlene to take this young girl named Ellie to this outpost controlled by the Fireflies so that she may be taken into their custody for reasons they're not so sure about. Before I speak further, this video is going to contain spoilers for episode 2, so I would recommend you go back and watch that second episode before you return to this video and see how I thought of it. This episode begins with another flashback, this time to 2003 in Jakarta. A doctor is picked up by the police from a restaurant as she's asked to perform an examination on a patient who is thought to have been infected with the cordyceps fungi. This leads to a conversation between her and the police chief, and she informs him that there is virtually no cure and no vaccine to stop this outbreak from happening, and that the best thing to happen would be to virtually bomb the entire city to stop the outbreak from spreading any further. This scene works further as a backdrop to explore just the impacts of this outbreak and how it spreads to the rest of the world and where it originally began. And I think this scene also exemplifies some of the great camera work that's used in this episode. There's this wide shot at this table between the doctor and the chief as they are in conversation. She has a cup of tea in her hands, and the camera slowly zooms in as it begins to explore how she's feeling within with all the information that's coming together. Her hands are shaking as she carefully puts the cup of tea down in fear, and you immediately know that she is truly afraid. The camera work and the acting both work together in this scene to really provide this good example of visual storytelling, as it shows just how afraid these people really are when they come to their conclusions of the pure ramifications of this outbreak. But then it cuts back to the present where Ellie, Joel and Tess are all together within this room. Tess and Joel are really distant from Ellie as they have now realised that she has been bitten really recently and that she may be infected, but this is until she tells them that she is actually immune. So this episode's runtime is mainly made up of Joel, Tess and Ellie as they are trekking through this abandoned city. And from this episode we get to see more of those original settings that we saw from the game. We see the two skyscrapers, one that's bent over that's immediately recognisable, and there are points where they go inside buildings to find a different path that feel immediately familiar. There's a lot of CGI work that's used in these exterior settings with the skyscrapers. There are times where, of course, it is more noticeable than other parts, like there is this one moment where they are approaching the museum, and the front of the museum has this kind of lighting effect to represent sunlight at the top of it, and it does kind of stand out more as a CGI building than others. But what definitely stands out in terms of visuals is the interiors, like where they go inside this building that is flooded with water and is filled with moss, spores and everything, and the production work for this scene alone was so well done. But my favourite parts from all of this is the growing relationships that is built between these three characters. You get to see Tess as she grows a little bit more of a bond with Ellie than Joel does, but there's also this really great small scene where Tess has to go and try and find a path through all this rubble, and Joel and Ellie are left alone for a moment to kind of talk to each other and insult each other more. And all of it hints at the growing bond that they both share as the storyline goes on, as we all know from the game. So this episode is just filled with dialogue and character interactions that are really investing as their relationships just build and build, and these three characters begin to trust each other a little bit more. But all of this builds up to quite possibly my favourite scene in this entire show so far, and that is the museum itself. This entire sequence is just drenched in atmosphere. Everything works so well to create this everlasting sense of suspense. The scene is overrun with all this disturbing imagery of dead bodies as they have succumbed to the fungi. The total darkness that surrounds them and the music and lack thereof works so well. This is such a beautifully directed sequence. And while I felt the introduction to them could have been maybe a little bit better, when it's all silent and you hear that iconic clicking sound, It is a great moment. As the first clickers emerge, you are given an even greater sense of dread. And as they struggle really hard to not make sounds, the sudden intensity as they hear them and begin attacking is all really nail-biting. And I love the shot when Joel is fighting this clicker and he's trying to hide. It's this wide zooming shot where Joel is struggling to really quietly reload his revolver, and on the edge of the screen there is this clicker searching for him, and it turns round and begins walking towards him. It zooms in on Joel's face as he tries still to make very little noise. All the music stops and you hear that really loud click as if it's right next to him. It is such great use of camera. It is so well done. Now, aside from the flashbacks that try to add more context to the origins of the outbreak, the series also tries to expand on the lore of the Cordyceps itself. For example, when they are on this balcony and they are looking down on this entire horde of runners as they are feasting on this pile of corpses, Tess explains to Ellie that essentially the Cordyceps also burrows underground, and it creates this kind of network that connects everyone that's been infected. Everyone that's within a mile radius, when they are connected via the Cordyceps strands, they can pick up when one of them has been killed. This immediately tells them that someone out there is not infected and that they can prey on them. This wasn't in the game, but it's actually a really interesting way of adding on to how the fungi works. So in the end, I actually enjoyed this episode even more than the first. It's shorter, but it's way sweeter. There is so much intensity in the museum alone. The visuals, I guess, can be a little bit inconsistent, as the exterior shots rely way more on CGI, which can at times be way more noticeable, but the interior shots are so well done, and the exteriors for the most part do hold up fairly well. And the writing, banter, and relationships that are already building already have me really invested, and I still cannot wait for the third one, the one that comes after that, when they introduce all these new characters like Bill and new enemies like the Bloater. Thank you so much as always for watching this review. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next video.